Hey everybody, this is Anthony. Welcome. It is episode 68 of our daily vlog series. It is Wednesday, January 3rd, and this, of course, is the daily vlog series where we cover news and notes in the VR gaming industry, sometimes reviewing VR games, sometimes taking a look at upcoming VR games, and all kinds of things like this. And so let's go ahead and get into today's show. News is a little bit light, so I hesitate to say that this is going to be a short show because every time I say that, it isn't. But I don't know. I really think it may be a short show this time. Let's go ahead and see what ends up happening. Okay, so the number one story of the day is doom and gloom, folks. This is the CPU apocalypse. Okay, so this story is coming to us from The Register, a UK-based website, and they have a story that has to do with Intel CPUs. A lot of us have Intel CPUs in our VR gaming PCs, and this story is not something that is going to make you sleep well at night, because the news is that this upcoming Tuesday, Microsoft is going to push through a patch for the Windows operating system that is going to affect Intel CPUs released during basically the last decade that could potentially slow down some of the Intel CPU processes by almost 30%. Okay, and so this story hit the Vive subreddit yesterday. It was the number one story at the top of the subreddit for almost the entire day. It also hit the Oculus subreddit as well. And this story has been garnering a lot of interest and a lot of concern from a lot of VR gamers out there, because a lot of us do have Intel CPUs. A lot of us are barely getting by as it is right now with things the way they are. And then now we hear, oh my God, there is going to be a 30% reduction in the CPU ability basically going forward. And this could really impact our gaming experience. I'm definitely in this boat myself. A lot of people are in this boat. It's funny because when we think of AMD, when we think of the red team, normally we're kind of laughing and snickering at people on the AMD side of the coin because we're like, why did you go AMD? You know, because typically AMD is notorious for not having the best drivers. They will talk about all these great things, but then ultimately their drivers aren't very good. And typically if you get an NVIDIA GeForce graphics card, you typically get better drivers and it's been better performance. And this has been the way it's been for years and years. And on the Intel CPU versus AMD CPU side, it's been that way as well. Now, of course, AMD did bring out the Ryzen line of CPUs, which has improved their situation a little bit, but still, you go to most people, they will recommend that you go with an Intel CPU, but maybe this is going to change with this current story. So here's the deal. Okay, I looked into this story, read a lot about it, and it's quite detailed and it's very specific. It basically has to do with a hardware-based security flaw, okay, that is in these Intel processors, and it's a flaw that can be exploited in a very significant kind of way and could cause some serious problems for everyone involved. So Microsoft on Tuesday, January 9th, now remember, this is the opening day of Winter Consumer Electronics Show. We're hoping to hear possibly announcements for new HMDs that could be coming, new Steam VR HMDs. Who knows, maybe even Valve will show up and show off one of their hidden VR games. That's possible. I mean, anything is possible. That's coming on January 9th. Well, that same exact day, Microsoft is going to be pushing through an update that could possibly damage some of the performance capabilities of Intel CPUs. And so there could be this 30% reduction. Now, looking into the story more, one of the things that I've been able to determine is the 30% performance hit is kind of hyperbole to a degree. It's a little bit of fear mongering that the performance hit is most likely to be somewhere between around 17 and 23%, somewhere in that kind of range. And then the other part of this is the performance hit is to a very specific task that the CPU performs, which might not be as related to gaming as we might well, it's good news, really. It doesn't seem like this task is as related to video games, computer games, as we might have feared. So hopefully this won't really hurt us that much. Now, personally, I have to say that if you want to find something that is going to ruin your experience, you'll find it. And so when I saw this story, I looked at it, I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm not losing any sleep over this. Now, if I wake up next Tuesday and in the afternoon, I fire up Fallout 4 VR and it plays like absolute dog shit, that will, of course, be a different scenario. But I'm not expecting that to happen. I'm not really worried about this. If there really is truly a major problem with this, I think what we're going to see is we're going to see some class action lawsuits, because think of how many hardcore PC gamers there are around the world that have paid top dollar for some of these Intel CPUs, and they're expecting high-end, high-level performance. And for something to come along, this is a hardware security flaw. For something to come along like this that could possibly lower their performance significantly, these people are going to be mighty pissed, and they have every reason to be pissed. If this is Intel's fault, if this is their responsibility, they need to man up and deal with it. Now, obviously, Intel is a huge, giant corporation. They don't want to get into a situation with any kind of class action lawsuit. They're going to try to avoid that as much as possible. So we're just going to have to kind of see what happens. I guess next Tuesday, next week, we'll have to see when this update hits. Will there be significant effects that will go on through the VR gaming industry in terms of this performance? The hope has to be that it's not going to be that bad. It's not going to be that horrible, and most of us won't notice it. Now, there may be a few games, a few specific games that really use this type of feature of an Intel CPU, and these games could suffer a 17 to 23% hit in that particular category, and it could show up in actual gameplay. But I think we just need to wait. We need to be patient. We need to wait. We need to see what happens here. But yeah, it's funny. It's just when you think things can't get worse in terms of possible game performance with all of the minimum specifications being raised. You know, we've gone from a GTX 970 as being the minimum spec, and we've gone from 8 gigabytes of RAM, and now we're up to a 1070, and we're up to 16 gigabytes of RAM. So changes continue to happen to min spec, and then on top of this, we get this Intel CPU news. Now, it might be kind of good for some of us that haven't made the upgrade yet in a new motherboard and a new CPU. We can kind of wait for all of this to kind of settle itself out. And obviously, Intel will eventually have some new CPUs that don't have this problem whatsoever. And so those of us that have been holding off on upgrades can kind of benefit from that. There's also the possibility you could go over to the AMD side and jump on a Ryzen-based CPU as well. So it will be interesting to see what happens next week. Is this CPU Armageddon, or is this much ado about nothing? And we're not really sure. I would say don't worry too much. Let's see what happens. Let the shit hit the fan first, and let's see if this is really a disaster. If not, it's not a big deal. We don't need to worry about it. Okay, second story of the day is CCP Games. So we've heard a while back that CCP Games was shutting down all of their VR development, and it appears that they were not bullshitting. They were absolutely serious about this. Their Atlanta-based studio that was developing Spark, that did develop Spark, has been completely disbanded. All those employees are out of jobs. Obviously, they're scrambling and finding other jobs. Very talented developers there in that Atlanta-based studio. I'm sure they're not going to have that huge of a problem finding new work. It's probably going to be a little bit of an irritation for them, but hopefully they'll all land on their feet. So there is that. But the Sheffield, but the Newcastle studio, okay, the Newcastle studio for CCP Games, these are the guys that basically did Valkyrie. This studio has been acquired by Sumo Digital. So Sumo Digital was able to acquire this studio. I believe around 34 members of this studio are going to stick together, and they will be working under the Sumo Digital umbrella. So CCP Games wasn't playing around. You know, they got rid of their Newcastle studio. They shut down the Atlanta-based studio. So they are definitely moving away from VR development, at least for the foreseeable future. But the good news is Sumo Digital is able to scoop these guys up. Sumo Digital is based in Sheffield, UK, and Sumo Digital, in terms of the kind of games that they've been involved with, Sumo Digital has worked with Turn 10 Studios on Forza 7. They've worked on Little Big Planet 3. They're currently working on Crackdown 3 and Dead Island 2. So pretty primetime developer. I mean, they're working on Crackdown 3 for Microsoft, and they're working on Dead Island 2. I forget the publisher for Dead Island 2 that is having them work on this. But now they're going to have this Newcastle studio from CCP Games, the guys that did work on Valkyrie. So it'll be interesting to see, is Sumo Digital going to put these guys to work on another space sim? Will it be another VR game? Will they have them work on a normal flat game? Or could it be that these guys are going to work on VR versions of Crackdown or VR versions of Dead Island 2? It's not completely inconceivable. We saw what we saw what ZeniMax did with Escalation Studios. Sometimes you bring in a studio that has some experience in VR, and you have them help your existing studios to create a VR version of some of the games that you're already working on. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Crackdown could eventually have a VR mode, or Dead Island 2. We got to remember here, Microsoft. What about Microsoft? I need to do a special show that is just 100% what the hell is Microsoft doing with VR? But we talked about this in the State of the VR Union show, where I was talking about PlayStation VR, and I was talking about how this unbelievable lead that they have on Microsoft in the console VR space. Sony has a full 2-year lead, and that's right now. As we speak, Sony has this 2-year gap on Microsoft in VR gaming, and it's going to be at least a 3-year gap, because Microsoft is not going to have a VR headset available for their Xbox One X until at least November of this year, and that's going to put them a full 3 years behind Sony. But we do know that Microsoft is probably going to have something later this year. They can't afford to let Sony just continue to distance themselves in the console VR space. Now, it's not so much about technology. What it's about is a game library. Sony is going to have this massive library of VR games, proven hits, that are known to work well in VR. They're going to have this massive library, this back catalog. Even if Microsoft were to show up this November with a VR headset for the Xbox One X, they're still dealing with this massive back catalog that Sony has. So I really expect Microsoft to come to the table with a VR headset later this year, and they're going to need VR games to show this off. They're going to have VR games that are going to sell this. And Microsoft has Sumo Digital working on Crackdown 3. They've been working on Crackdown 3 for a very long time. So, 1 + 1 = 2, right? I mean, obviously this is complete speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if we get to E3 2018, Microsoft is showing off their VR headset, and they mention, oh yeah, guess what? Crackdown 3 is going to have a special VR mode where you can be an agent from a first-person VR perspective. And who knows, maybe this Newcastle studio is going to be involved in that in some way, or maybe not. We don't know, but, just thought I would throw that out there as a possibility. So Newcastle Studio from CCP Games is now under the Sumo Digital brand, and CCP Games has absolutely washed their hands of VR. It's very sad, but oh well, we wish them luck, and maybe in about 2 or 3 years they will return to the VR fold, so we don't need to worry about that too much. Okay, another little story I wanted to get into. Now, this is a little side note story, but I did see this and I thought it's a good opportunity for me to bring something up. Okay, so if you have a PlayStation VR, there is a VR experience called Chainsmokers in Paris. Now, here's the bad news. The bad news is apparently this is not on the PlayStation Store anymore. Why this has disappeared from the PlayStation Store, I have no idea. It's really unfortunate because I really like this experience. I thought this was really cool. And the reason that this is in the news is because the company behind this, which is, let's see here, it's Lost in Music / Sony, which is part of Sony Music. They have announced that they are going to be bringing a new music video type experience similar to Chainsmokers in Paris, and it's going to be coming to PlayStation VR early in 2018. Now, unfortunately, that's all we have to go on. We have no idea what this is going to be. As far as we know, it's just going to be one experience. But the one thing I wanted to bring up with this is for any of you that has seen this Chainsmokers in Paris experience, if you have tried it on your PlayStation VR, then you know, like I know, that music videos in VR is a super cool thing. And this is something that I believe a lot of music artists should take full and total advantage of this. For example, we know that Kin is coming to the Oculus Rift by House of Secrets. This is a platformer game that's supposedly coming in early 2018. I believe actually sometime in January it's supposed to come for the Oculus Rift. But they made that music video Surge, and we can all try Surge. Surge is available on the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive. You can try it out. It's really awesome. Music videos in VR, I think it's just a natural. I think it's a marriage made in heaven. You can simply put the headset on and you can enter this world and be surrounded with the music, and you can have the visuals correlate with the music. And that's what happened with Chainsmokers in Paris, an outstanding feature. It's really unfortunate that that is not available on the PlayStation Network anymore. I don't know if there's any secret way to be able to download that and somehow get it back, but it's kind of unfortunate that isn't available. But the good news is we are going to get a new experience. And I kind of was wondering, for everybody out there, don't you guys agree that music videos in VR, this could be a great opportunity to get the masses more interested in VR? Why doesn't Kanye West have a music video in VR, or Beyonce, or any artist you can possibly imagine? Experiment with this stuff. Make just one little music video in VR. You can do some incredibly creative things. Hopefully some of these artists have seen what the Chainsmokers in Paris was able to do, and hopefully some of them have been inspired by that, and we can get some interesting music videos in VR. I don't really know of any. I know of the Chainsmokers in Paris. I know of Surge, but that's pretty much all I know about. But we are going to get a new one in early 2018. I'm absolutely looking forward to that. Okay, the last story I wanted to get into is a PC VR gaming drought. And yeah, this is another Debbie Downer story to go along with the Intel CPU one. And what I thought with this is that if you look at early 2018, well, actually, the reason I bring up this topic is I was on the Vive subreddit and somebody had a thread. What is the next AAA game? What's the next AAA game we should be waiting for? Somebody had a thread like this, and I hopped into the thread and I was curious, what are people going to respond with? What are they going to tell this guy? And the truth is, we really don't know what the next big AAA game is for PC VR. Okay, you can talk about Marvel Powers United VR, which is an exclusive for the Oculus Rift. Obviously, that is a big game. We have no date for that. We don't know when that's coming. We thought it was early 2018, but here we are in the month of January, and we don't have any kind of a date whatsoever. So who knows what's going on with that? Then you could bring up, oh, budget cuts. What about budget cuts? Well, honestly, I would be shocked. I would absolutely be shocked if we see budget cuts prior to April of this year. I don't even know if we're going to get it in April or May. We might not get budget cuts until possibly June or July. And I'm talking about early 2018. What are we going to be playing in January, February, and March? I don't see budget cuts coming out during this time. Then we have the 3 Valve games, obviously the 3 hidden Valve games. Now, that announcement could come at any given time. Who knows when these 3 Valve games are going to come? Obviously, one of them you would think has to come in 2018 because we didn't get any of them in 2017. You'd have to think at least one of them. Now, CES is coming next Tuesday. Who knows if Valve could possibly show up there with a hardware partner and show off one of these games? That's a possibility, but I wouldn't bank on it. And so it's very possible that none of these 3 Valve games are going to show their heads in the first quarter of 2018. We could talk about Resident Evil 7. What about Resident Evil 7? The 1-year exclusivity is going to expire later this month. That's true, but we haven't heard any announcement whatsoever. Now, personally, I'd be shocked if you can't buy Resident Evil 7 for your Rift or your Vive at some point in the month of February. I would be shocked if that is not the case. Still, even if it is the case, this game is 1 year late. A lot of the hype has dissipated off of it. This is a seated controller-based game, which a lot of the VR snobs aren't really into. So I don't know how much of a bang. You know what would be really cool, though, actually? What if Capcom completely redesigned Resident Evil 7 to take full and total advantage of motion controllers like the Vive Wands and the Oculus Touch? Now, that would be huge. I don't expect that that's going to happen, but if that did happen, that could be a real kick in the pants for the industry. Resident Evil 7 could be a really huge, hot game. Even PSVR gamers would probably want to try it on a Rift or a Vive just to have that legitimate hand presence. I don't expect this to happen at all, but possibility is there. Some people in this thread were mentioning Skyrim VR. We know Bethesda has already confirmed that Skyrim VR is coming to other platforms in 2018. They probably have a 1-year exclusivity, so we're probably looking at November. But yeah, you know, there might be a little bit of a PC VR gaming drought. Now, we have to hope that maybe Seeking Dawn could possibly make its way out during this time frame, and there's some other games that could possibly sneak out during this time frame. Now, it's not going to be a drought on PlayStation VR. PlayStation VR has plenty of heat. PlayStation VR has The Inpatient coming later this month. PlayStation VR has Moss coming in February. They got Bravo Team coming in March. So PlayStation VR has plenty of firepower on hand for early 2018. But in terms of like truly legitimate AAA fare on PC VR platforms, it might be a little bit slow in early 2018. Okay, guys, so that's basically going to go ahead and wrap it up. This has been episode 68 of our daily vlog series. Of course, it is Wednesday, January 3rd, and I will be back same time, same bat channel. See you guys tomorrow. Take it easy. Later.